lightninginsider.com, Erik Erlendsson. We got Bo Kempers in our future, it looks like, buddy.
We'll see. There's a lot to go. I mean, the Panthers still have to...
Look at you downplaying it. Come on.
Well, basically, I'm just sick of seeing the Panthers in the postseason. I mean, look, the Leafs still have to play Florida. They still have to go to Florida, right? The Leafs still have to play the Lightning. There's still some back-to-backs for both those teams left. I mean, anything can happen. I know last night was certainly disappointing. They didn't come away with 2 points, especially considering the chances they had and the way that they did play. But, there's still 8 games left. I mean, there's still time. There's only a 3-point gap, and there's a head-to-head. Obviously, if you lose those head-to-heads, it's a different story. But, in a lot of ways, the Lightning actually still control their own fate.
So somebody's asking, Benny is asking, can I get a double E's burger? So I guess what is on a double E burger? If you could make your own burger for a restaurant, what would it be?
Yeesh.
It's a good one.
That's a good question. It would definitely have bacon on it.
Yeah, buddy.
Probably maybe some white American cheese.
Okay.
Maybe some mushrooms. It would depend.
Okay.
Barbecue sauce,
right,
and some onion rings on it.
I like that.
Little Southwest burger.
I like it. Yeah, I don't like mushrooms, but I'll eat the rest of it. That's awesome. Talk me off the ledge, E. Talk me off the ledge. Out of the two of them, I'm pretty level-headed for the most part, but there's these times I don't know what it is. You can blame my parents. Yeah, blame my parents, the most level-headed people that we've ever met. I don't know where the up and down and the craziness from me and my brother come from, because my parents are the most level-headed people on the planet. But last night I was fuming after that game, because you hear about the process and the result, and I get that. But is there any concern at all that there's not, there's no concern? I'm not talking about the team not winning, but I'm just talking about the fact that they got to be able to win certain games like that. We've given flowers to the opposing goalies seemingly so much over these last 2 years. At some point, you got to win these games, right? I mean, and if you put up a stinker, if you lose a game where the team's better than you, I wouldn't get nearly upset. If they didn't play as well, Ottawa outplayed them, you tip your hat and you move on. But you outplayed them. It's Linus Ullmark, and I know he was an all-star a couple of years ago. Yeah, you got to win games like that every once in a while too. No, right? Talk me off the ledge, would you?
Well, first of all, they didn't turn Linus Ullmark into a Vezina winner last night. He actually is a Vezina winner. True. So, I mean, look, it's frustrating because of the chances you had. I mean, Yanni Gourde had a partial breakaway. Brandon Hagel had a breakaway. Sorelli had a 2-on-1. I mean, we're used to seeing them finish those opportunities, right? And they didn't last night. I mean, Ullmark came up with some saves. You're like, how in the hell? Not necessarily, as Chief says, oh, wow, saves, but really, he got that one? The chance Yanni Gourde had coming around the net on trying to sweep the backhander. And, they had some really good looks that just didn't go in for them. I guess the one thing to kind of maybe not completely talk you off the ledge is I think that's the 5th or 6th game they have lost 2-1 this year. And it's the one thing I kind of look at in the record. I think they're now 1-17-3 in games in which they failed to score more than 2 goals. Right. That's, low scoring games. But I mean, that number, I'm going to put an asterisk by that number though, because
it's not great for everybody.
No, there's been a number of games where they've been ahead 2-0 late and they get an empty netter. Right. So it becomes a 3-0 game. So they hit the 3 goals, or, so empty netters kind of fall into that and skew that stat a little bit. But the only game they've won where they've scored fewer than 3 goals was the game against Philadelphia back on St. Patrick's Day, where Vazzy pitched the shutout and they won 2-0. So in that aspect, I understand what you're saying, but sometimes you get goalied, and everybody wants to try and say, well, if that happens in the playoffs, they're in trouble. Well, you give me that game on a consistent basis in a 7-game series, I don't think Linus Ullmark is going to come up with a game like that and keep them off the board. I just don't think it's happening. And like I say this every time this year, what you saw last night doesn't necessarily mean it's going to translate into, a playoff series. Right. Now, the one thing that was really frustrating beyond the scoring chances that didn't go in was their face-off performance in the third period. They were, I think, 2 for 13 on even strength faceoffs in the third period.
Ugh.
I think at one point they're down a goal. I think they lost 6 straight faceoffs. I mean, that's the hard part to kind of swallow a little bit, because you lose possession, right? You're trying to score a goal, and you're losing the puck. And a lot of those were offensive zone faceoffs. Ottawa iced the puck a number of times. So, those were faceoffs that were coming back in the offensive zone, and they just couldn't win them. It didn't matter who they threw out. I mean, Luke Glendening had a good night in the circle. He threw him out there twice in the final minute or so. He lost both of them, right? It's just kind of, one of those things where they didn't bear down and get the faceoff when they really needed it, I think, until Nick Paul got one with about 30 seconds to go. So, but again, you give me the way they played in that game on a consistent basis, they're going to win more of those games than they're going to lose.
All right, kind of talked me off maybe a little bit. I'm still there. I think I'm still hanging out there. All right, let's get into the most important conversation that we're going to have, because this is just what it is. Ed and I spoke about this for like 8 minutes yesterday. It was such a long discussion, and it's the number one discussion now, because you look at Ryan Leonard with the Capitals now. You look at Yannick Perreault's his dad. Gabe Perreault getting his debut with the Rangers. You're looking at McCarr signing with the Avalanche. We've been speaking about this for the last 2 months, and I'm preface it the same way I did yesterday with Ed. This is not something that you and I and anybody else was just speculating. This is something that Julian spoke about himself during our fireside chats, because I know how it gets sometimes. But you guys are pulling this out of your ass. You don't know what you're talking about. Like, this isn't something that we're just speculating on, and that's the reason why we keep bringing it up. Julian himself, who at times can keep things close to the vest and really, am I wrong for saying that? Like, I felt like he was a lot more communicative before we get into, everything. I felt like Julian was a lot more open about the Isaac Howard conversation during the fireside chats than I thought he was going to be. Do you agree with that sentiment?
Yeah, I mean, he spoke, about the improvements that Isaac has made this year, and look, he even brought up Connor Kurth, unprompted, because he happened to go see Minnesota, Michigan play right before we talked to him. Connor Kurth did sign a contract, right? He signed the 2-year contract that kicks in next year. He's in Syracuse on an ATO for the rest of the year. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of that though comes down to the fact that, I mean, we know how valuable a prospect he is for them, right? Mm-hmm. We haven't talked about a Lightning prospect this much probably since Jonathan Drouin in 2013.
Right.
We didn't talk about Braden Point in this way. We didn't talk about Anthony Cirelli in this way. We knew that they were pretty good players, and Braden Point certainly opened eyes in training camp. And, all we've got a chance to look at with Isaac Howard is development camp in the summer. But I think he realizes how important of a prospect he is and why we're talking about him. And, the World Junior he had helping the USA win, not this year, but last year, especially his performance in the gold medal game. And then the type of season he had this year, right? He's a finalist, one of the 3 finalists for the Hobey Baker Award, which will be announced right before the Frozen Four next weekend. So I think with all that in mind, I think he understands that we understand how valuable of a player this is to their system. And it is very common in Isaac Howard's situation for players to come out after 3 years. It's just the way things work. When you're that high level of a prospect, you don't usually play 4 years in college.
Yeah, we're seeing that across all the collegiate sports now, where guys are coming out early if they're that good, and you're very, very rare that you see guys stay all 4 years. But as I alluded to, we're seeing these other guys, they're signing, they're already playing games. We're at a position now with Isaac Howard where, we understand what the salary cap ramifications are. If there's any team that could figure out a way to make this happen, it's the Tampa Bay Lightning. I'm sure Julian and his crew are crunching the numbers as we speak. What are your thoughts on the entire process so far? What we have heard, what we haven't heard, what the Lightning would have to do to make this work, and if you think we'll see him with the club, whether it's in the regular season or the playoffs this year.
Well, I'm sure I'm going to echo a lot of what Ed said yesterday, but I haven't listened to it.
Thanks,
I mean, if it wasn't, sorry.
It's okay. You're a busy guy.
If it wasn't for the salary cap situation, he'd be here already. I mean, it's just the way, that's how simple this process is. If it wasn't for the constraints that the team has, he'd be here already. And it's not as simple as has been suggested. Well, just setting reassign Cam Atkinson to Syracuse and open up a space. I think they need more than that.
Yeah.
Right. Because with these entry-level contracts, you have to account for the bonus structure. Obviously, he probably would not attain whatever bonuses would be in it. I mean, usually they're goals and, are you a Calder candidate, everything like that. But you have to account for them. And if they don't hit it, it doesn't count against your cap. But you have to account for it until they don't hit the bonuses, right? So there's a lot more room than just the 850 or 875 or whatever that Cam Atkinson is making. That only gives you about 900,000 in available cap space, and that's not enough. So it would have to require more than one roster move. And as we know, the salary cap is a daily thing. You throw whatever pennies you have into the jar and see how fast it fills up until you get to the end of the season. So there are scenarios in which, a couple of days before the end of the year, you could see this done. So I am curious to see how things go here before we get to that point, because Syracuse's season ends about the same. Could you sign him to that contract and assign him to Syracuse, let him play a couple of games there and then bring him up and maybe let him play in, one of the last couple of games? I could see that scenario.
So that's a possibility then. So that's a possibility. But they'd have to sign him. So they could sign him to an entry-level contract, but it won't count against the cap, or it will count against the cap?
If he's assigned to Syracuse, it does not.
Okay. So do you think that's the most likely route then?
If I'm Isaac Howard, I'm not going to Syracuse. That's my thought process on it. Because
now, to those people that want to know, and it may sound like a stupid question, but why? Why are you at this position now where you are saying it's lightning or bust pretty much right now?
Well, he has the leverage in a lot of ways because he has that final year of college eligibility. And again, look, as far as I understand it, there's no breakdown in talks. There's no right. The two sides are very open to a deal getting done, and the desire, if you're Isaac Howard's agent here, is to get the contract done before the end of the regular season and find a way to burn year one of entry-level contract, because that accelerates your path to restricted free agency and unrestricted free agency, right? That's always the situation in these contracts. So if I'm Howard here, I want that. Well, first of all, NHL money is a lot better than AHL money. I can tell you that. So that means something. And you get that first year burned by being on an NHL roster. So if I'm Howard, I have the leverage here. I don't want to go to the AHL. I want to be in the NHL, and he has that leverage. It's negotiating leverage is what it comes down to. He could always say, I'm going to go back to college for a fourth year, and then things start to get a little hairy. You don't want that to be the case, right? You don't want to flirt with the possibility of losing a prospect of that, for nothing. So, and to me, if I'm Isaac Howard and I'm his representative, that's my thought process on this.
Does he lose that? Does he burn that year of eligibility, or does he burn that year on the ELC if he joins the team just for the postseason?
It's a good question, because technically players don't get paid.
Yeah.
During the playoffs, they get pooled. There's playoff pool money, and depending on how far you get, there's.
But you wouldn't want that though if you were the Lightning or Isaac Howard to just join the team in the postseason, right?
Well, I mean, there's a benefit to being around.
Yeah.
To being around the team. And,
well, I'm saying if he's going to play, if he's just a part of the Black Aces and is with the guys, that's one thing. But I just have a feeling if he's going to be with the team, they're going to want him to play on the team, and he would probably want to be with the team, right?
Yeah, I don't know if they throw him into a playoff game
without regular season playing.
Just in general, without some sort of, feel for it, right? He's making the jump from college to the NHL is not what it used to be. It used to be a bigger jump. It's not as big of a jump. A lot of these guys come in prepared. I mean, look at Cale Makar. He jumped from college right into the Colorado lineup for the
Matthew
playoffs.
Nyes did it, yeah.
I think Makar score a goal in his NHL debut, which was in the playoffs. So, I mean, these guys are certainly more poised and polished and are used to the spotlight than maybe they have been in years past, especially with the World Juniors and everything. But, just knowing the Lightning and the way they work, I don't know if they would want that to be the case. I'm not saying it can't be and it won't be. Just given their history of how they deal with these type of players and situations, they don't normally just, throw a player in making the jump from college when they're in a situation, they're a cup contending team, right? So, but I think, if you could get him into a game or two before the end of the regular season and just let him see the speed of the game, that's the biggest adjustment for players, is the speed of the game. Now, he played in the Big Ten, and he played some pretty good programs in Michigan and Ohio State, Penn State. Penn State and Ohio State were both tournament teams. So you got some good competition, but it's not NHL competition, right? It's bigger, faster, stronger. Guys are leaning on you. The playoffs are more intense. I mean, it's a different world for a forward, I think, to jump in and do things like that. So it's not an ideal situation. I'm not ruling it out, but it doesn't seem likely if you're the Lightning to do that. When you have, a Mitchell Chaffee who's had a hard time kind of getting the lineup here of late, and you have an Atkinson and whoever else they might have. And look, it depends. Maybe he goes to Syracuse and plays in the lineup there, right? They're probably going to get in the playoffs, unless something disastrous happens over their final 2-week stretch. So there'll be playoff games there available too.
My whole thing with Isaac Howard is that, is there anybody on this roster that was as highly touted? And I mean, you look at Hedman, obviously, but I mean, a lot of these other guys, mid-draft picks, right? For the most part, you're looking at Isaac Howard, and I understand the jump. But do you think there's any way that the Lightning look at him and go, hey, he can give us – I don't think that they're going to look at him and saying, all right, he can play with Point and Kucherov. But do you think there's any part of the Lightning that look at Isaac Howard and go, wow, he can give us something in that middle six that we don't currently have on the roster right now? And I'm not talking about replacing a guy like Cirelli or Hagel, obviously, but playing with those guys or helping out on the third line, because, it's hard to not look at that game last night against Ottawa and think, well, if he's there and he's got that knack for scoring goals, that's the kind of thing that you do throughout your entire career, regardless of what the competition is. I'm not talking about coming up and automatically lighting the world on fire, but he's got a knack for coming up with big plays. It's hard not to look at that game last night and think, if he was around the net, he probably would have poked one in, or he would have been in the right spot. Is there any way, do you think, that the Lightning look at it and go, not that we need him, but man, he could really present maybe just a different look than what we already have on the roster? Because was Mitchell Chaffee a highly regarded prospect? Is he a guy that is really part of the long-term plans? I mean, if he's been scratched so much the last couple of weeks, I just feel like I don't know if there's any hurt of getting him in there and possibly having a different look. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. You keep him with the team and then you go from there.
I think you're looking at it from only one end of the ice.
Mm-hmm.
Could he score a goal for you? Sure, he could.
Right.
He's got talent. He's a very talented player. But, you don't know what his defensive acumen is. I know Julian has praised his 200-foot game. I talked to Stacey Roost. He's a general manager in Syracuse, but he's still the director of player personnel. They both talked about how much he's worked on his 200-foot game. But that's the biggest difference. There's assignments. There's, that's where the speed of the game, factors in the most, is, how can you adjust and make the right reads defensively? So, yeah, maybe he could score you a goal, but what if he costs you a goal? Right. That's the perspective. If you're John Cooper and the coaching staff, I mean, we've heard Coop talk about that quite a bit, about it all has to start with defensive play. And do not forget, in 2014, and I know Coop that was his first full year in the NHL. When it came to the series against Montreal, who was in the lineup and who was out? Nikita Kucherov was out of the lineup, and Cedric Paquette was in the lineup. Mm-hmm. So that's the perspective you kind of have to have. Yes, he could potentially help you offensively. He's an offensively gifted player. He's got a lot of skill. What can he do at the other end that's not going to hurt you? And sometimes that's a perspective that teams and coaching staffs will take a look at, because you want to put a player in the best opportunity to succeed. Mm-hmm. And if they feel as if a mistake cost a team, what could that do in the long run? Right. I mean, because I think back, and now it didn't affect Cedric Paquette because he wasn't really a highly thought of prospect at the time, but he committed a penalty that ended up being the series clinching goal for Montreal. Right. So now it didn't affect him. There wasn't a lot of expectations, and obviously said he went on to be a pretty decent role player here in his years here. But I mean, that's something you kind of have to think about as well.
That's a good point. What do you think about a guy like Connor Geekie? Because I feel like he's played a lot better. We've seen a lot of good things from him in Syracuse. I'm a little surprised that maybe, because knock on wood, the Lightning have been relatively healthy up front pretty much this entire season. We haven't seen a lot of guys, 7 guys missing or anything like that. What's your thoughts on Connor Geekie and how he's played from, the limited, access we have to him from up there in Syracuse? And is there a possibility that we see Geekie down the stretch here?
Well, his contract is kind of what Isaac Howard's contract would be like, right? So there's bonus structures and everything else that you would have to account for,
right,
if you bring him up. His base salary is fine. It's those bonuses that you have to worry about. So I don't know, unless something happens to somebody, that there's a chance you'll see, because they're carrying basically 2 extra forwards right now anyway, right? I know they're dressing 7 and 11 most nights, so you've got 2 extra forwards, so it'll be hard, in a quote unquote emergency situation where you can use an emergency recall where you don't burn one of your limited recalls after the trade deadline. But the good news is that he's kind of found his offensive game a little bit. That kind of helps grow with the confidence. He's got 9 goals. I think he's got 6 of them in the last 8 games or something like that, 6 in the last 9 games. So you're seeing the offense come, and with that comes confidence. And that's what you want to see. That's what they wanted to see out of him, because you could see it. His game was suffering in terms of the confidence and how he can play. And he brings size. Obviously, he's got size. The Lightning don't have a lot of size up front. They're not a big team forward-wise. All their size is on the back end. So he would bring that element. He brings top 6 type skill for sure. And we'll see. There's also something to be said that, if he's not going to crack the lineup here and Syracuse is in the playoffs, which is better served? Even if is he better playing third line minutes, 6 or 7, 10 a night here? Or is he better playing 18 to 22 in a playoff situation for Syracuse? And, those are the things that I think they're going to have to balance out and figure out what is best for Connor Geekie in the long run, if that comes to fruition. And, look, I think I talked to Coop right before they left town, because, we saw the lineup kind of move around a little bit, lines moved around a bit. So I asked him, at what point do you kind of figure you have your lineup? Do you stop, quote unquote, experimenting? And he seemed pretty happy with what things look like right now, with Point, Gensel, and Kucherov, with Paul out there with Cirelli and Hagel, Gord in the middle with Bjorkstrand and Gonsalves, and then Glendening and Gergensons on the fourth line, and wingers rotating with them and dressing 7-11. I think they've been pretty happy with how that has played out. So, do you want to experiment with that? Do you want to kind of, change things up there? So there's a lot of considerations to kind of go into place here over the next 2 weeks before the regular season ends, and you get ready for the playoffs. Does the team you play matter in how you organize your lines, right? Do you want Paul in a matchup situation where he's with Hagel and Cirelli, who has been their matchup line? Do you want him back in the middle? There's lots of options that the coaching staff could do. And, do you bring up a player from Syracuse, if it's Geekie, and insert that? Do you do that right away? There's a lot of things to consider when talking about bringing up players. And because if Geekie's going to be here, he's got to play.
Yeah.
Right? Because then he's definitely best served getting postseason minutes in a different situation than not playing here.
What do you make of Bjorkstrand and Gord now that it's been, 12, 14 games since they've been here? What do you make of their time with the Bolts so far?
I think you're seeing Bjorkstrand get more and more comfortable, right? I did have a chance to chat with him before they left town, and, him and his family are in their own place now. Nice. Right. That's a big thing off of a player's mind when they get moved in season, is to have that sort of off the ice stuff settle down a little bit. And, your mind doesn't have to think too much about that. You can worry more about what's taking place on the ice. I think you're seeing him more comfortable in the role that he's asked to play, in the type of style they want him to play, in the system that he's playing in. We've seen him get that wrist shot off, like we were waiting for it. And I know in the Utah game, his second goal was the 8th goal of an 8-0 game, but that's the shot we know he can score on, right? Wrist shot from distance, good, hard, accurate wrist shot. He almost got one off last night, almost in a similar manner. Got just deflected enough, or just enough of a stick to get in the way to not get the full whip through with the wrist shot. So he's looking more and more comfortable, and that's going to be a good sign. As I told him, I said, I think Lightning fans are sick of seeing you score goals against this team in the playoffs. He goes, yeah, I'm ready to score some for this team. So, we'll see how that plays out. And Yanni Gord, He's been better than I thought, to be honest with you. He's got 9 assists, I think, now since he's been up. He's had chances to score. I think you'd like to see him get that goal to kind of just bring his energy level up. But I think he's so vocal, right? He's such a talker. I think it's infectious on the team. I think it gets the team's attention and kind of keeps them involved in the game. He'll drag you into the game. He got in the fight the other night on the island. I mean, he'll do that kind of stuff, and he has done that kind of stuff. So, I know we had the talk right before the trade went down, that the Yanni Gourde you're getting now is not the same Yanni Gourde we saw before. And I still think that's the case, but he's better than I thought he would be. I think he's definitely energized being here, being part of this team again, and being a part of a playoff situation, to where Seattle wasn't in that case. So it's been good to have him back. I think I'd like to see him win some more faceoffs and just get that first goal. Otherwise, I think Yanni's been better than we thought he would be. You
think he'll be back next year?
I don't know. It's a good question. They want him back. I mean, obviously Julian was very open about that idea. And, Yanni said he wasn't ready to kind of think about that yet. He was more worried about getting in and thinking things. I think they'd love to have him back. I mean, Luke Glendening's not signed next year at this point, right? Could he be a guy that just replaces Luke Glendening? It's a possibility. I think they'd like to have him back. I think Yanni would like to be back. It's just like everything else, it's going to come down to what the contract looks like.
Yeah. The dollars have to make sense. That's for sure. What do we have up on lightninginsider.com right now, buddy?
Hey, talking a lot about last night's game, right? Yeah. And, it was a type of game where the Lightning lost the game, but they didn't lose it, right? There wasn't a ton of mistakes that cost them that game. The biggest reason was the goalie at the other end. And sometimes it just happens in hockey. So a lot of sort of discussion on that case that's up there right now. So, go back and check it out and agree with me or don't agree with me. That's what I'm always looking for.
lightninginsider.com. Go sign up today. Use that promo code JNZ. Get $10 off, not just this season, but every recurring season. I say it a lot. Support local, especially with this Lightning team. Always going deep into the postseason. Erik gives you this in-depth coverage and that knowledge. He's been around for so long. Nobody knows the Lightning in the Tampa Bay area quite like Erik Erlendsson, lightninginsider.com. So please sign up today. Birthday gifts, don't use it for an anniversary gift, right? Your wife will probably get pissed. But birthdays, Christmas, Easter, Hanukkah, it's a great thing to get for the big Lightning fan that you know. Appreciate you, my friend. Oh, wait, real quick. How was the game on Wednesday? I told everybody I was going to ask you.
Well, obviously watching Skeen's pitch was a treat. Boy, can he throw. And I didn't realize at the time the seats we ended up getting were right down by the bullpen, so we got to see him throw some bullpen before he went out with a very good view of that. The atmosphere as a whole, different. Oh, my gosh, it's so much different. I mean, I don't think you're going to ever be able to get over the feel of games being played there that it doesn't have a spring training look and feel to it, just because the outfield walls and you don't have the high walls and everything. But like because Ed went with me and two of the kids, I looked at Ed one time and I went, man, it's quiet in here.
Yeah.
Right. You're used to at the Trop. There's at least ambient noise and, there's something somewhere you can kind of hear. There's a murmur or whatever. Like you got none of that at points during the game on Wednesday that it just felt quiet. And that was weird to me. And I understand there's huge difference between, the Trop and playing outdoors at Steinbrenner. So it was much different, but you know what wasn't different? The concession prices.
Eddie, sell the team chants. Somebody wants to know. Did you hear any of those?
I did not hear any of those. I think because we were all mesmerized by watching Skeen's pitch.
Yeah, you got that right. Nobody wanted to hear that. They were just trying to. Everybody's locked in on the best pitcher in baseball right now. Erik _Erlendsson. That's a K, not a C. 2 S's after the D. lightninginsider.com. Again, $10 off. Not just this season, but every recurring one after that. Appreciate it, my friend. Thank you much. Talk to you next week.
My pleasure. And Kevin just wanted me to let you know that it felt unnatural.
What does it say? What does that say?
Said it's unnatural. That's unnatural. How he felt about the atmosphere at Steinbrenner.
Well, tell Kevin, what's really natural? Kevin De Bruyne is gone. He's out of here. See ya. Get out of here. We don't want you anymore. And Manchester Derby coming up this weekend, baby. We're going to go for the double dip, baby. Listen, we don't got much to hang our hat on this year. If United can pull off the double against City, I mean, I'm good. I'll be a happy fan. That is for sure. So you let your son know, all right?
I'll try and relay the message. Probably not as enthusiastically though.
You're the man. Have a good weekend, buddy.
All right, man. See you, Dave.
All right, pal.